Yeah. Smell like quarantine spirit, am I right? Yeah, less stress, let your mind be free. Shift when the fog lift, you can finally see. There's a feedback loop that delay like an echo. Tune your frequency up and let go. Loud and clear is how you need to hear. And reason disappear when you feed the fear. There's a feedback loop, the warp like distortion. Keep your mind sharp like a swordsman.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Unashamed Truth Podcast. I'm Terry. For those of you who watch us regularly, you know Gift.
Yes.
And with us this week, we have two guests. We have Lori, who's a returning favorite. Thanks for joining us, Lori. And we have our special guest who's going to be with us tonight, Aviva.
Hey.
Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. So first of all, let's just start with, how was your week, everybody? I know it's only Tuesday, so it's kind of hard to ask. But I'm taking a forecast for the rest of the week. I guess nobody wants to go, so that means nobody's having a good week.
I guess I was done. It's all right. It's all right. We're preparing for our students to get back on campus next week, so it's quite busy. What's the feel like? Can you cut the tension, sort of thing? Yeah. So everyone is just like stressed, but it's pretty exciting time. So yeah,
That's it.
Yeah. But we're here.
Are you going to be on campus much, or are you going to be working remotely still? Or
I'll be working remotely. Yeah.
So at least that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. I'd rather, it's safer for me.
Of course. Aviva, how was your week so far?
So far it's a lot better than last week, so that's good. Yeah, I had a very intense last 7 days, so I'm really happy to be back in the ho drum of just regular routine.
Yeah,
nice and easy, because last week was like, it was a sickle cell week, so it was crazy.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
So that's right. Kind of, unfortunately, it's in line with our topic, so we'll maybe find out a bit more about that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, big things are happening from what I've been hearing.
Yeah, so I started a full-time stage. So I'm doing a pediatric nurse practitioner degree. And so I started full-time stage yesterday in the complex care clinic at the Children's. And I was extremely anxious about starting, because let's just say the education in the time of COVID was a challenge. But yeah, it's going better than I expected, obviously, with all my anxiety. And it's just good to be in it now, even though some days I don't know what I'm doing, but at least I don't have to anticipate like what can go wrong. Like if it's going wrong, I see it and then address it, I guess. But yeah.
Well, that feeling of not knowing what you're doing is something. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine earlier today, and I realized that a lot of us are just walking around not knowing exactly what we're doing, just hoping we just get our jobs done and nobody notices.
Straight up facts, bro.
Don't worry, that feeling is going to be with you for a little while, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
well, in some context, I find that the parents know right away if you don't know what you're doing. Parents are very much experts at their very complex children.
Yeah.
As Aviva knows, I'm sure. They become experts. And so if you walk in and you know nothing and you just kind of like ramble on, it's very annoying for the families, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Of course. You don't want to have that deer in the headlights look.
I don't know about you, Lori, but I usually have this look like, I know you lying, but please.
I know the look. I've seen the look.
Yeah. That's it.
What about you?
I hope I never get that look from you.
I hope not either.
Do geez, me. How was my day? My day was, well, my week so far has been all right, I guess. It's still in the early beginnings. I can tell, actually, I'm starting to hear about the return to work. And I will say that I'm a touch stressed about it. But, you know, from what I can tell, things are just, this is the way that things are heading. And we'll just roll with the punches, I guess, for now, you know?
Is it like a gradual return or like a full-blown?
It's going to be a gradual return. But it's funny because at first, the feeling they gave us was, it's going to be stretched out over months, but it feels like this is going to be stretched out over weeks. So it's going to be a little bit of a quick return back to the office. And, you know, I understand people are kind of getting a little tired of being stuck at home so much and everything. And it's understandable that you need to return to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I feel like there's still too many unanswered questions. And there's too much uncertainty around just exactly what COVID is and what the best practices are, you know, and it's like, you know, you go places, you see that people are not wearing masks properly. You know, half the time people have their nose sticking out or, you know, they have them as chin straps walking around. Yeah. And, you know, I listen, I'm not, I don't want to get into the debate of conspiracies on whether or not this is a big risk, but it's like, for me, it's the simplest thing. For the well-being of everybody around you, just wear a freaking mask. It's not going to kill you, you know? But anyways, everybody has their feelings and their sentiments about that. Not the point of the podcast.
I mean, you and I have talked about it, man. People don't want to smell their breaths. You know, that's
fact. It. That's it. I'm telling you, man, a chiclet, no, they don't even sell chiclets anymore. I guess Excel goes a long way. So cool. So for those of you who had a chance to watch last week's episode, we want to actually take a second to thank Bethany for having joined us last week. She shared her very personal experience as a person living with sickle cell anemia, and we're really thankful for the insight that she's given us into this illness. And now we have Aviva, who's going to be joining us today. Before I forget. I've also posted the links to last week's episode below. So please, if you guys want to check out that episode, the episode after watching this one, feel free to do so. Aviva is a mom. She has, I'll let her give her details herself, but she is living with a child who has sickle cell anemia. So we just thought it would be really interesting to get her perspective as somebody who has to go through the challenges and also understand and interpret from the perspective of a mom how her kid is dealing and coping with this. So thank you very much for making the time to join us. We know you're a busy person with a lot going on. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the fact that you guys asked me because I have been, I think I'm like a borderline activist, or at least an advocate for the things that I feel are really important to me. And I think it's super important that we speak about this particular disease or disorder, however people want to classify it, and not just get more awareness, but also to push out that it needs more support institutionally, from the government, from different programs. And it's something that, in a way it can be prevented if you understand, what your blood genome types are. It's something that could be potentially cured. However, I'm a little bit apprehensive right now as to like what the cure is and how it pertains to like how it would like mess up my life or, delay my life. But then I heard that it's great after. So, I mean, there's just there's so much awareness and knowledge that people, especially in the Black community, need to have about this. And I think that it's important just to talk about it and continue the conversation.
Cool. So I guess maybe give us a little bit of a history as to like how things unfolded. So like when you kind of came aware of the fact that I think it's your son who has sickle cell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of how things progressed.
Well, basically, first of all, when I was in my teens, my dad told me that you carry and your sister carry the sickle cell trait. And so I always kind of had this knowledge of what a sickle cell trait is, but I never like thought in my head that it was something that it would affect me personally. So since it didn't affect me personally to that extent, I didn't really think about how it would affect having children potentially in the future. And then when I had my third child, it was kind of like because her dad comes from a country, Nigeria, where it's quite, at least it's quite frequent or more likely that he would also have a trait, the trait as well. And we were, frantically trying to see if we can get him tested to find out. And when my daughter was born, she didn't have it. I think she has a trait, but she ended up having something else when she was born, which is it's called ABO incompatibility. I'm sure Lori's heard about it. And that kind of got me a little bit scared. And that should have been like, oh, okay, like, like,
yeah, kind of
be a little bit more proactive there, right? And obviously not. So then, unfortunately, when I was pregnant with my son, my child who does have sickle cell, I was dealing with postpartum depression, but during the pregnancy, and it extended, of course, after I had the child as well. So I was feeling and unpacking a lot, like mentally, emotionally. And then when 2 weeks after my son was born, I got a phone call from the children's hospital, and I think it was the nurse, and she was like, okay, so as you know, we do screening for children when they're born, and your son's result came back that we need you to come and see the hematology team at the hospital. And like that just tore me apart because I was already dealing with so much with the postpartum. So that just made me feel like that was just like I didn't need that at that particular point, and that just got me feeling so bad. And I was just like completely. It was more about me at that point because he was a baby, and apparently when you're a baby, you don't really have sickle cells yet. You still have something called fetal hemoglobin, which basically is for like the first year or so. You still have all the hemoglobin from when you're in utero, when your mom was pregnant with you. So you're more or less healthy. And as it starts to sort of, fade away, and then your body starts producing its regular blood cells, that's when you start getting, a lot of times children start getting their first crises or their first issues with sickle cell around their first birthday, second birthday, something like that. So at first, I wasn't really anything to do with him and more to do with me. And it was just really difficult for me because I just didn't know what to do. I was scared. Every time he got a little nick or a cut or he had a runny nose, I was like freaking out. And unfortunately, he was born in January, and by the time he was about 10 months, he had already had his first blood transfusion. He had already had 2 or 3 hospital stays, and they had placed him on hydroxyurea he was about 10 months, so pretty young. So so I'm guessing he might have like a more, I wouldn't say severe, but a more acute version of the disease. Form of the disease. So
we learned last week. We learned last week about SC and SS.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Okay,
yes.
So he has the more acute one was SS. Okay, yeah.
Exactly, yes, exactly. Okay. And so it's just been a lot. It's a lot. And unfortunately his father and I separated when he was 1. So then having to deal with the hospitalizations as a single parent is like beyond difficult. So hard. So hard. Yeah.
How are you navigating that? How was that process looking like?
Oh, well, for me, it's a constant process. I'm always trying to find reliable babysitters who can be available at a moment's notice. There is a service called I think it's called Maison Kangaroo. Unfortunately, they were flooded a couple of years ago, and they've been closed. And normally they're like a hospice for like people in my situation where I have to rent to the hospital. I have to stay with my child 3, 4, 5 days, and I have another child, and I don't have really anyone to watch them at times. So it could just be really hard. And then, and I only started driving. It's going to be a year ago in November. So for the first year or so, I was almost up until I got in November. I was doing bus, metro, Uber.
Oh God,
it was crazy.
My goodness.
It's a lot of
well,
stress.
you're definitely a champ for being able to push through the situation, because postpartum depression already, from what I've heard of people going through it, is already intense enough as it is, and I can't imagine on top of that it's, you know, a child who's potentially going to start showing signs of an illness soon, you know.
Exactly. So yeah, it's really difficult.
Wow. And I'm curious in terms of like how has raising him been different from raising your other kids?
You know, so far there hasn't been any large differences because he's still a kid, you know, so he's still very active. He has a lot of energy. He loves to play. He loves to, you know, hang out with other children. It's just giving him that extra level of awareness. Like he's going to be 3 in January. So now he's starting, we're trying to get him to understand, okay, you can't get too cold. Make sure you're drinking a lot. You have to eat fruits and vegetables every day. You have to be healthy. Tell mommy if you have a runny nose. Tell mommy if you have a boo-boo somewhere.
Right.
Because sometimes he'll have something and he may not tell me because he wants to play. Or he might have like he has to be aware that are your fingers swollen? Are your toes swollen? Do you have a boo-boo somewhere? So it's always just sort of keeping him aware of his body and how to keep him at that just nice sort of balance, like not too cold, not too hot, not dehydrated, not, you know, and then of course, because of that, it's been difficult, you know, for example, putting him in daycare sometimes hard because that's where kids catch the most amount of colds and they get all their, you know, community immunization as a but then unfortunately he'll catch like the smallest cold, and if I don't get that cold under control in a week and less, his hemoglobin will drop, his reticulites will drop, his body will drop, and then he'll get like an anemic episode, and then he'll have to go to the hospital, do blood tests, stay there for days upon days. Sometimes he gets he's the last time we actually saw you in the hospital, Terry, he actually had I suspect that he had coronavirus, to be honest with you, but he had a complete chest,
acute chest syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really bad. It was really, really bad. And then I caught it, and I was like sick for like almost with pneumonia type symptoms, like 3-4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so I just need to make this point, okay? And I'm going to say it. And for those of you who are watching the podcast who are going to be offended by what I'm about to say, okay, I don't give a shit. Wear a mask. Wear a mask for the sake of people like Aviva who have kids who are going to be exposed to your germs if you don't cover up. Fine, you may not care about yourself, but there are people who are living with the stress that's induced by illnesses like sickle cell anemia, forms of cancer, there are dialysis patients, people that are seemingly healthy on the outside that you don't realize carry something that could be so life-threatening to them. So please, for what it's worth, wear a mask.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just need to get that off the chest. I'm going to take a quick...
And social distancing, like ever since, like, first of all, I've always been the type of person, like, don't touch my kids. I don't know why, but people like touching people's kids in public, like, or like pet kids, like, oh, your hair's so like.
Oh no, that's wrong.
That
oh no,
she's not a dog. She's
not a dog. No.
Right?
I'm debating if I share this story or not, because I know that.
Do it.
So I'll make it real fast. So we were in Florida. Okay, Jordan was just a few months old, just at the stage where we felt comfortable leaving the house with her, and everybody everywhere. I don't know if it's because we were Black particularly, but like we didn't see them doing it much to white babies, but to us, they would like all these older white people would be like, "Oh, little baby," and want to always touch her. And one time we turn around and we see this woman's finger. This woman's about to touch Jordan. Her finger all looks all funky and stuff. And we're like, "Yo, get away from our kid." Sorry. I don't want to distract with a silly story, but I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Actually, the other day, we were in, I think it was Dollarama. Yeah, we were in Dollarama. So I'm walking with my son, and we're in Dollarama, and this older gentleman, who, I mean, I don't want to be rough on the elderly. I understand that, I look, first of all, if anyone knows me, knows that like my best friends in life unfortunately passed away, but they were my grandparents. Like I only have I have one left, and that he's still like my best friend. I love elderly people. I get along with seniors; they're amazing. But at this point, because of the statistics, I know that the majority of people who've been hospitalized and who have been sick because of COVID are 70, 80, and over. So I don't want to be discriminatory, but I don't want to be lax either. And we were walking, and this older gentleman was trying to give my son a high five. And I was like, no, you're not touching my kid. Because my child looks healthy. When you see him, he looks super healthy. But I don't know what you have. And you're trying to touch my child, give him a high five. Like, no, don't touch people's kids, because I don't know. And then he's a baby, so he'll just take his hand. He'll be like, and he'll stick the entire hand. Literally, he sticks his entire hand in his mouth. Like, no.
Yeah.
We police that so much with the kids, and like, I'm pretty bad when, especially going to public bathrooms with my kids. Fabi laughs at me all the time because I'm like, don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. I'm a bit of a germaphobe when it comes to public washrooms, so. But that's the thing, is because, kids, and that's a little bit of the challenge that we're even facing with sending our daughters back. So the day that you saw us at the hospital, Aviva, we were there because Jordan had an asthma attack, and it persisted through the night. So we went to the emergency in the morning, and she ended up having to take 8 doses of Ventolin or something like that. Like, it was nuts, the shock treatment that they had to give her. So the thing is, kids at daycare, they play around with each other, they touch things, they share toys, and all these things communicate, and it's hard to police that. So, it's one thing when you have a child that doesn't have any illnesses, but in a case like yours, I can imagine how much more stressful that is,
It causes a lot of anxiety. Like, I'm realizing that I have anxiety, or some type of anxiety, because I'm always thinking like what, and it's like beyond, like I was telling someone the other day, I'm like, I basically live in Corona since my son was born. Like, that's been my mind, like my life. It's like I've been in Corona. And sometimes it's like I'm so much happier when my son's at home with me, because I know he's not getting sick. Like, he hasn't, except for last week, but even last week he didn't have a cold. He hasn't had a cold in months. Because he's just at home with me, and I don't, like, I keep him. But then he's 2. He wants to play. He wants to make friends, and he's starting to talk more coherently. People can understand the sentences. So he needs to also have a social aspect to his life. But I'm just like, okay. But I know that what it means for me, it means that he'll start back at daycare. Within a couple of weeks, he'll catch his first cold, because they all catch a cold within 4 weeks of starting daycare.
Days even.
Yeah. And hopefully, I will start, we've been doing a ginger lemon turmeric and types of juices every morning, trying to keep his immune system boosted. But if he catches a cold and it doesn't go well, and he starts with a fever, and then my daughter just started elementary, and so that's in my head. That's all I'm thinking about. Oh my gosh, like she's gonna start elementary, he's gonna have his cold. Then now what am I gonna do? Go back and forth between school and the hospital? And it's just like I don't want to deal with that, but it's like I can't be selfish. They need their lives, they need their education. It's just hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard thing to balance.
Of course. It's I can't even imagine the strain of, like, we have a daughter who has severe allergies, and like we're always constantly on the lookout. But I mean, for us, that's something that's fairly easy to police, because we know that worst case, it's going to be something that we just didn't realize that had milk in it. But when she's eating at home or with any of her family members or at school, they've all been warned to look out for that. But I mean, with sickle cell anemia, it's something that can be, it's a crisis that hits, and then automatically it's hospitalization, treatments, and all this stuff. That's intense. That's really intense. Yeah. So, a question. So I was going to ask, how are you handling this COVID situation? But I can imagine that it's almost no change to the routine for you in a sense.
Yeah, like, to be honest with you, COVID has been. I actually loved this whole lockdown. I was so happy because I finally felt that the whole Quebec was just doing what they needed to do to keep everyone healthy and stay at home, and no one was getting sick, and there was we still had to go to the hospital a couple of times because he spiked a fever, and he would be there for the 2 days that he needed to be there, but they let us in and they let us out because they didn't want us to be in the hospital for an extended period of time, which was okay. But to be honest with you, I actually was a little bit more calmer because, like I said, there is no school, there's no daycare, we're all at home. It's easier to say, hey, I have 2-3 people who are always at home too. So I'll just, if I needed to go to the hospital, they didn't have any, ulterior plans or alternative plans, so it was easy just to drop her off. So it was actually awesome for me during COVID. I get it. In my head, I'm like, when is the second wave coming? Because we need another lockdown.
No.
That's bad.
No, but I get what you're saying, because I'm realizing too that I'm not, like I said a bit earlier, I'm not so prepared to go back to work as I think I should be at this stage. Because like I'm dreading, the colds, the this and that, putting kids back in daycare and all the headaches. So now, a question that I had was, kids cry for everything, and how easy is it to decipher, especially when your son was, before he was starting to speak and maybe can communicate? How could you tell that, like, this is not just a normal cry, this is probably a crisis or something related to sickle cell?
Well, first of all, we're very blessed. My son had his first crisis last week, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
So he's never had a crisis. He's always had issues with his hemoglobin. So he has a hemoglobin baseline of about 80, which is still
that's low.
That's low, right?
But for normal people, like healthy people, I would say.
Exactly. But that's his baseline. And so when he catches a cold, sometimes it drops to like 60s, or once it went down to like in the 50s, and he needed like blood transfusions and stuff like that. But usually at that point, it's like you can tell that he needs to see a doctor right away. He's like almost like I wouldn't say he's like limp, but he just has no energy. He can barely move. He's like, he can barely look at you in the eye because he's like so drained. So that's, but usually when that happens, it's because, he's had a fever, he's had a cold. It drained all of the little bit of resources that he had. And, it's usually that. So what I've learned is actually more the cycle of how to, keep him from having a drop in his hemoglobin over the last couple of years. Because in the beginning, it would happen like I wouldn't understand like what's happening. Like, oh my gosh, like he caught a cold, and then why is he going to the hospital? He's over his cold, but not realizing it's because the cold is actually draining him, like physically, all of his resources that he might have. And if I don't do what I need to do to, like, you know, give him the nutrition, make sure his meds are good, make sure that he's on the hydroxyurea, everything is good, and especially that he's hydrated, then I know for like it's almost certain that he's going to go to the hospital a week after a cold. So it's really that. But his first crisis that he had was last week. We went to the beach. I noticed that he was starting to get colds from playing in the water. I wasn't trying to let him play in the water, but I mean, which kid doesn't want to play in the water?
Yeah.
And as soon as he started getting cold, I pulled him out of the water, and I eventually tried to wrap him up and, you know, get him warmed up right away. But he was throwing a tantrum. He didn't like that. So his towel didn't stay on, and he got too cold. And then about 2 hours after that, he was complaining of a very, very big stomach ache. And he was like in a lot of pain. But by then he was able to say, "Mommy, ow, 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 ow." And he was rolling on the floor, and he was in so, like, you can tell he was in an immense amount of pain.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it persisted and it persisted. So by the time I brought him to the hospital, like he needed a couple of doses of morphine, and because he was starting to hyperventilate, like it was to that point where he was like, it was that bad. Yeah.
Wow.
And if I may, I think, like, I'm not a parent, but for having seen a lot of kids in pain crisis, it's not like I stubbed my toe, you know, and then I'm gonna go back and play. It's such intense pain that they can't focus on anything else. They can't play. They have to kind of just concentrate on breathing often. And depending on the age, I think it might be a little bit early, but they become very quickly acquainted with the sickle cell pain, and they know that's what it is. Wherever it ends up appearing in the body, it could be a limb, it could be the tummy, it could be anywhere, but they know this is my sickle cell pain, or this is something else. They get very mature very fast
about the type of thing.
I feel really bad.
Question for you, Aviva. Like, have you been able to like connect with other parents who have a child with sickle cell, or like just
I have. Well, first of all, there's the foundation, like the Sickle Cell Anemia Foundation. I think you mentioned Daphne, so I met her as well through the Sickle Cell Foundation. We had, like, you know, we have different. Usually in the summer, we actually have a camp for the kids.
You keep telling us about that.
Yeah, but we didn't have it this year. We, you know, we have different activities, and then just going to different places, and I would just randomly meet a child who has sickle cell, like a parent or a child, and we connect, we talk, and they share me their experience, and they give me their little tricks and stuff like that. Excuse me. So it's been really interesting to find out, you know, who, because sometimes you don't know who has it. Sometimes as adults, it's really it's kind of like incognito. You can't see that they have something that you're dealing with. And then parents sometimes too, I feel like we want to do our best for a child to feel like they're normal. So we won't necessarily just like advertise like, "Hey, my child had sickle cell," like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not right off the bat, right? So it's just over socializing. I've come to connect with some people, and parents especially.
And actually, that was something that marked us that marked me, I would say, about the interview with Daphne last week. Was she was explaining how, in her case, you know, her and her sister were like, we're the only ones, like, for a degree that for a certain amount of time, that's how they felt. And when they met, I think it was the person who founded the Association for Sickle Cell Anemia in Quebec. And then, their parents kind of started talking and stuff like that, and they met other children with this illness. It was, such a big kind of a relief almost to a certain extent, because now you have people that understand what it is that you're going through, and I'm fortunate enough to not be somebody with a chronic illness, but, if ever I was to develop something like that, I would hope that at least I can, have a community towards which to turn to help cope with the challenges that come with that. So I'm happy to hear that you have those resources. And what other resources have you come across, like for parents?
Well, I mean, first of all, social media is amazing. I'm a part of a lot of like online groups for sickle cell. Like there's sickle cell mommy groups and just groups in general with different people who have sickle cell. And it's just like I said, like it's and that's what I'm talking about when I say like I wish there was a little bit more, because really all that we really have is the foundation, the social workers at the hospital, even though sometimes they're a little bit at times slightly clueless, but I'll give them a pass.
100% I don't know them.
Sometimes they're talking to me and I'm just like,
tell us a little bit more. Examples.
Yeah, please elaborate.
Examples, please.
Well, I had to be the one, for example, to find out about Maison Kangaroo. I had asked the social worker at the hospital if there's any type of resource that I can use. And she's like, I don't know. I'll have to research that for you. And I'm like, sis, you've been working here for like at least a year. Like no one's ever asked you that question like once. So I was just like, just stuff like that. I'm just like, that I mean, because the thing about it is that I feel like we're sometimes in a corner, like of all, unfortunately, of chronic illnesses and immune disorders and things of that nature. I feel that sickle cell is kind of like everyone kind of gets like the main stage, and then sickle cell gets like this little off to the side. So it's like we don't really have much. So I always tell people, like, if all we have is the foundation, like, please support it as much as you can, because literally the majority, I would say like 99%, because there are people who are not Black or African descent who do have sickle cell. But at least in Quebec, the majority of us are Black people and Black families. And a lot of them are immigrant families as well.
Right.
So it's that adds I feel like adds another layer. I'm a child of immigrants, but I'm born and raised here, so I have people that I've known here, and I have a community I've known here from my birth. But if you're an immigrant here, and especially if you're a new immigrant and you just arrived, and I don't know how much friends or family or much of a community that you have, and then your child is born with the disease, it's like that could be so debilitating, because you're still trying to settle and make roots here, and you have to deal with this, and it throws you off. So the foundation is super vital. Like sometimes they give, not for myself, I haven't asked, but sometimes they give, help families with groceries, like they really help families. So it's super important, and we need a lot of help. We really do.
I just want to take a quick second just to acknowledge. So we have a few people that said hi to us tonight. So we had Yannick, who's saying hi. I'm not sure. I guess Yannick is one of Gift's homies.
Yes.
Then we had O'Neill Smith, who reached out, and he said that he is 33 years old, living with sickle cell anemia. So it's encouraging to see people that because I remember Daphne mentioned that doctors didn't give a very good outlook on the duration of a patient at first, and so it's good to see people living into their 30s, 40s. We heard about a lady who lived into the 70s, her 90s with sickle cell anemia. So it's really cool to see that. The question came in, and I'm going to maybe reformulate it a little bit, but coming from Fabi, she says it seems, or it feels like you felt guilty about your son's diagnosis. I would say, if so, how did you get over that?
I'm not over it. I still feel guilty about it a lot. Like it's something that I'm still processing. I was actually speaking with my fiance the other day, and I was like, I broke down. I was like, I feel so guilty. I feel like it's my fault. I feel like I, because it's your DNA, it's your blood that causes this for your child. You understand? So it's like, how can you not feel? And then, you know, he had to be like, listen, because he has, unfortunately, his best friend passed away from sickle cell. Back in Africa, and he was like, look, I know how, in a way, I kind of know how you feel because I had someone so close to me who lost their life because of it. And you really have to just teach your child how to take care of him. You have to really, you know, sometimes curtail his activity. If he's really active, he's really energetic, you have to try to teach him to calm down, but you don't feel guilty about it. You have to educate him. But it's still something that I don't know. I might need therapy. I don't know, because it's like, I'm not even, maybe that kind of still runs in with like the postpartum, like I'm not completely over it. I mean, it's been 2 years, so I'm pretty sure I'm over it, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like there's still so many different emotional things that I'm still unpacking because of my child's sickle cell. But one thing that does help is having a supportive family, is having unfortunately at first his dad, I don't know why, but blamed me for his child having sickle cell. His dad didn't really have much like of a knowledge about it, and he didn't realize that it was from him and from me. So he was like, he's like, I knew you would do it. I was like, what are you talking? I was like, what? He's like, I knew it.
What did you do?
I cried. I was
oh God.
Postpartum when he was telling me.
Oh my God.
It just broke me down, like emotionally. It broke me down so many ways. And now, you know, but I had to be patient. I had to be forgiving. I had to just like kind of like be like, look, I'm gonna deal with this, but I'm gonna pray for you. And like last week was the first time that he actually came to the hospital and stayed for like more than a day when his child was in the hospital. And it took like 2 years. But you know what? Our child is going to have a long life. So if it takes 2 years, I mean, the next 18 to 20 years, his dad is going to be like, that's the mindset I have to give. But stuff like that helps. Not being the only one to have to shoulder it helps.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think I'd like to say that I don't know how comforting that is, but it's I think it's a shared experience by parents whose children have genetic disorders, where and you know, in the hospital they come in and we try to explain how the genetic disorder or how like the hereditary disorder happened to the child, right? So like sickle cell disease is genetic and it's a recessive gene, so you need one from the dad and one from the mom, so they both have to be carriers at least, and they both have to give it. And so in saying that, I don't know if all the time we understand exactly how that affects the person receiving that, because it does create a huge sense of guilt for parents who feel like, oh, that's what I gave my child. I gave my child this disease, and then, you know, everything that comes with it. So you're really not alone. And I don't think it's abnormal for you to have that feeling. It's not at all. It's very, very valid, very legitimate. And it's also just like, you're clearly a good mom. You're clearly taking care of him. You're like very attuned to his needs, to like, you know, how do I prevent a crisis? I don't even have anything to add in terms of like what you need to do, right? You informed yourself, you found support. So it's like, I can't tell you to get over it. It's not something that you just get over, right? But you learn to live with it, and you learn the facts, and you take care of your child the best you can.
The best, yeah. And, you know, just pray, you know, and I'm really glad that you said that, you know, like you're in like the research, and I'm just hoping that there's more research and there's more treatments, because sometimes I feel like we're so kind of like pigeonholed into like there's basically one treatment, and I still don't feel completely comfortable with the treatment. His dad is completely against the treatment. His dad's like, I did some research and I heard that it causes, you know, spleen cancer in some people, and you know, some people in the parents groups and the, you know, the sickle cell parents groups are like, yeah, that's such a horrible. So it's like
the hydroxyurea, is that what you okay?
Yeah. So it's like, I know the research, I educated myself about it, but it's still like I think sometimes, especially being a Black person, sometimes we do tend to have a little bit of mistrust of
Yes.
like medicine and research, and we don't trust necessarily the results, because sometimes we're thinking, you know, these people did research, but I'm pretty sure they didn't do research on kids like our kids. They probably did research on like some other kids, you know, not Black kids, or so they're like, that's really like a lot of the mindset a lot of people have. So there's this huge mistrust, and if I have no choice, I have no choice, but I wish I had choices. I wish I had options. I wish there was more than just that, because it does have a very potentially, it could be quite like the side effects aren't huge, but it could have side effects. Thanks, Sadio. It could have side effects, you know, and you don't want you want your child to have a good life, and you want your child to grow up to be a strong adult, and you're thinking of those consequences, and you're like, I hope that they don't affect him in his adult life either.
So I think this is a good little moment to make a link as to why we are happy that Lori was able to join us tonight. So for those of you watching the podcast who don't know this, so Lori, of course, we've called her Nurse Lori before, so you know she works, and she works at the Children's Hospital. And for a brief period of time, she was working for the research department at the Children's. Okay.
A year.
My bad. Okay.
Oh, who's that?
But
the kids are interrupting. Sorry.
Oh, hi.
Oh.
You guys want to say hi? Say hi, Isaiah.
Hi, Isaiah.
Hi, Isaiah.
Hi,
How you doing,
cutie.
buddy?
How you
He's
doing?
so cute.
You doing
Yes.
good? Are you guys watching Bugs Bunny? Yeah. Okay. I'm just having a conversation with some of my friends. But when we're done, I'll come watch Bugs Bunny with you guys. Okay. Okay, you guys. All right. So go watch your show. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Oh. Okay. So he's so cute.
Oh, okay. So they're not trying to leave right now. Okay. So
It's okay.
That's
We don't mind when the kids crash the podcast.
okay.
So Lori worked at the Children's Hospital, and you worked in research specifically. Well, I'll let you explain. I'm just going to shut up.
All right. So I worked at the Children's on the medical inpatient ward actually for 4.5 years. And so I worked with the sickle cell patients when they came in for pain crises a lot, because that's where they're admitted usually. And I have to say, I kind of fell in love with that population of kids, with their families. We developed a really good rapport. And so after a while, someone came and said, hey, they're looking for someone in research for hematology, particularly because they want to open a study here for sickle cell disease. And as soon as they said that, I was like, yes, me. I didn't really know what the job was. I was like, I want to work with these people. So I went, and I learned a lot. Oh, here's another kid crashing the party. Hello. Hello. Yeah. So I said yes, and I got the job, and I learned so much about the history of sickle cell in terms on the medical side, in terms of treatments, of developing the development of knowledge on the disease and everything. And I also got really I was confronted with the reality of the mistrust of Black people with the healthcare system. And I say that because I went to the clinic and I would say, okay, so there's this study that's opened for a new treatment for sickle cell disease that would help decrease hospitalizations by several days for pain crises. And there was a lot of, I think the fact that I'm Black helped people just come out and be like, girl, what are they not telling us? Yeah. Tell me the truth. Between you and me, and our blood is speaking, are they using my kid as a guinea pig? There was a lot of fear. We got a lot of no's. And so I felt like I had to do a lot of education of where research is at. Because the fear and the mistrust is not, it's legitimate because of history. And I don't want to get into all of the details of what's been done, but Black people have been treated horribly by medical research, and that is the truth. and it's fully recognized. We've come a long way since then. There's a lot of rules in place to avoid those types of things from happening again, but it's very understandable that people would be like, wait, I remember the 60s are not that far, and for someone who was there or whose parents were there, or grandparents or whatever. So anyway, particularly for sickle cell disease, I learned at that point that in the last 30 years, there's been no real research in terms of like how are we treating, how are we managing the day-to-day for sickle cell patients. There's like, we always do the same thing, right? So when I started the hospital, I learned the protocol for sickle cell. They come in with a fever or they come in with a pain crisis. We start an IV on them, give them fluids, start narcotics like as soon as possible to take care of the pain. And they're going to be in the hospital probably for like, a week-ish. And that's a lot. And then in learning that, I also started looking at the avenues that research was going towards. Unfortunately, the project that I was working on turned out that they didn't have like a significant value for sickle cell, so they stopped it. I was very disappointed because it looked very promising. But the other avenues, like I think you've probably heard of stem cell transplant, is something that is still being looked at. There's been some successful cases post-transplant, but I think the little bémol that I want to put on that is that stem cell transplant brings its own slew of things, right? That you have to deal with. It's a transplant from someone else's body into your body. And so you have to deal with anti-rejection meds. Your child will be immunosuppressed and like, so it's not like now you're healed and you never have to come to the hospital again. No, you kind of like traded your problems. And so that's kind of hard. It's hard to hear, right? And it's hard to deal with for parents. Oh, well, we're going to start this thing that's very dangerous and that's a lot, to take, but it's not a guarantee of like easy life afterwards. Yeah. So I really think that research is extremely important. But as Aviva was saying before, for research to work for, I'm going to say our children have to participate in research, and that's difficult. Because the reality, and that's what I always said to people, like when we were like looking over consent, research is not for your child. That's the reality. The research is going to be for the children in the future. So maybe 5 years down the line, maybe 10 years down the line. And that's the part that I think people have a really hard time with because it may or may not benefit. If it works, it will benefit your child. But we're not doing the research because we know it works. We're doing the research because we want to know if it works, right? So yeah, so it's really important. People have. I'm not saying everyone should like throw themselves into research, but I am saying to maybe learn to open your minds, ask for more information, ask for explanations, like ask about like safety. And anything that you're really worried about. And if you don't feel safe after that, for sure you say no. But like to have an open mind and maybe change the culture of like, we're just afraid and we're not going to touch anything. I think that's kind of playing against us as well.
Well, like I personally don't have any problems. Like if I wish I can be approached for some sort of research or trial of an alternative drug or an alternative therapy. Because I do feel like, okay, even though it's not a huge dose, my son is taking every day a small dosage of a chemotherapy drug. And he's taking that since he was 9 months, like 10 months old. Like that's hard to even like digest like mentally. Yeah. And to me, it's like, I mean, I've been hearing things about gene research and I've been hearing about a whole bunch of different things. And I know obviously, or I think that things are a little bit more accelerated in the States than they are in Canada in terms of like what they're doing, their achievements. And I also feel like in Canada, if there are going to be any trials, it's going to be a long time until they start actually doing them in Canada, because I feel like the whole Health Canada and how they sort of approve things, the process is a lot longer and a lot more strenuous from what I understand than let's say the FDA or something like that. So there's also positives and negatives, because I'm super grateful for the fact that my child was born with this. I was on mat leave at the time, but I didn't have to worry about like, okay, how am I going to pay for his medication? How am I going to how like you know, you just bring him to the hospital, and you know, there's a peace of mind there for that as well. And I do feel like I want to bring something else up, is that I feel like the government, from what I heard, like my child is still young, so I mean, I still talk to older parents. But what happens is by the time the child is 7 or so, they give you about, let's say, about $100 and some odd, $150 or so a month in of disability, I guess. But only Quebec, not Canada. It's not considered a disability in Canada or federally. And by the time the child is 7, I think it's on a per case basis. Like they kind of will choose who is more deserving or who would need it that year versus who wouldn't need it. And my whole thing is sickle cell is so, it could be super, from what I've learned about people when I've spoken, is that it could be super stable. Let's say when you're like 9 and 13, next thing you know, you turn 14, puberty hits, it changes something in your body, and then you start getting crises again. Or it could be that like you're good for a year or two, and then next thing you know, you just get a crisis because you're super stressed, or you know what I mean. So it's so hard, it's so unpredictable. What I'm trying to say, it could be managed, and when it's good, it's good. But because it's so unpredictable, the fact that we have to basically it's on a per case basis, and sometimes and it's so inconsistent. Sometimes the parents say that, oh, my child turned 7 and nothing changed, like everything was fine. So it's like I don't know what to expect basically. And believe it or not, that that disability, especially like as a single parent, it helps because every time I'm in the hospital, it sometimes is like up to like $50 to $100 a day in parking, food, in supplies, and everything that you would need. So if my child is there for 4 or 5 days, that can easily be $400 or $500.
Yeah,
believe it or not, and that's hard.
It racks up. Yeah,
it racks up. So it's like, you know, just stuff like that. So it's like I wish that we had a legislator. I wish we had a movement. I wish there was more to sort of champion that, at least in Quebec, if not in Canada, because it's, as a Black person, we kind of already do face, in terms of economic discrimination, it's there. As a Black woman, we earn less on a dollar, period. So I mean, that just sort of adds to the economic discrimination, to the economic disparity, that it's a disease that mainly affects Black people. And we're already sort of we're trying to get ourselves, you know, established financially with our families, you know, create legacy, buy homes. And it's a struggle, and it's difficult without having to deal with chronic illness. And now we tack that on, and sometimes it feels sometimes that we kind of have to prove, basically we have to prove that it hurts our children, or that it's something that hurts our family, and that's to me is simply unacceptable. Like, why do I have to prove that at all?
You know, I'm gonna say this, and it's gonna be an unpopular opinion, but it almost feels like anytime that people want to talk inclusion, anytime people want to talk diversity, it always ends at Black people. It ends there. You know what I mean? It caters to everybody else, every demographic, but it ends at Black people. Like, why is this not something that's treated like other disabilities, right? Where like the question's not, where you're not playing favorites as to who gets this bourse from the government. I can't think of the word in English or whatever. This benefit. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm tired. But why is it that way? You know, it's so frustrating, and it frustrates me to hear that on top of like all of what you deal with on a daily basis to care for your son, you have to worry about, are we going to qualify for this benefit? It's stupid to me. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Sorry for my rant.
And no, it's okay. But it's like it's not immediately, but the older he gets, the more it starts to sort of creep up in my nights, when I go to bed.
Mhm.
I have to start when I plan my life financially, when I plan my career, because of the fact that I have a child with a chronic illness that can be so severe. I really do have to start factoring the fact that in, like, okay, if my budget was 3,000 a month, let's say, I wish it was. That sounds like a great. If my budget was 3,000 a month, I have to automatically bring it up to 3,500. You understand? Or bring it up to 38, because I just need to have that
That
amount,
buffer.
that buffer. Yeah, because it's real. It really is real. It really is like a babysitter can be $300 for a weekend real, and so it's like it's I don't know. It's hard. So we deal with a lot being a parent of a sickle cell child, and you still have to be positive, and you still have to live your life. And what a lot of people who are adults with sickle cell, they always beg me. They're like, please don't make your child feel like that they can't play sports outside, or because when I was a kid, my mom would never let me go outside. Or when I was a kid, my mom would never so I hear the adults asking me, saying, please try your best. And it's like, I actually now understand why the parents did that, because you're trying to mitigate a lot. You're trying to mitigate a lot of risks, because it's as a child, you're just saying, my mom's not letting me go play outside. But as a parent, it's like, I'm trying to mitigate or lessen the risk of you getting a crisis, you getting sick, me missing 3, 4, 5 days of work. By the way, I had a job that actually basically kind of let me go, because they're like, you're out too much. Even though I told them, ahead, I have a child who's sick. They're like, yeah, but it's not really working out. So it's like, you have careers, you have to sort of figure out, you have to try to get a really good job. There's a lot you have to worry about. So you're like, you know what? The least you can do is not go play outside, sweetheart.
Yeah.
But then
it's heartbreaking to a child to hear.
Yeah,
for a child
exactly.
to hear.
So, Aviva, like, what would you encourage other parents who are new to this? Like, what would you say to them right now?
Don't freak out. Breathe. To be honest with you, from what I know at the children's, is that in general the staff is amazing. There's going to be a lot of pricks and pokes. I don't know if this is something that we know empirically, but from what I've heard, and I can actually attest to it, it can be really difficult to get a good IV in a sickle cell patient. So be prepared to witness lots of IV pokes, lots of failed IV pokes, lots of busted veins. It's normal. Be patient. If make it something that the whole family, if it's, if you have older children, let them also be aware and educate them as well, so that way they can help. My older kids are very much aware of their brother's illness, and so they assist me and they help him to remember things as well. So it could be a great learning and a good practice in caring and empathy for the older children and younger children as well. And because it's so important to eat well when you have sickle cell, it actually ends up helping you as well as a parent to start eating well as yourself and taking care of yourself and your health better. So make it like a family activity, like eating well, eating properly, so that the child doesn't feel like they're the only ones who have to eat, spinach every
vegetables.
night. Or vegetables, like everyone has to eat it, because we all want to stay healthy, but we know that it's sort of like a shared burden for everybody. So,
Of course.
And when they say keep hydrated, it's really important to keep hydrated. Like, if I can't stress anything enough, is keep hydrated.
Wow.
Everybody, just drink your water, everybody.
That's just good advice, period. But thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable. I know that it's not easy sometimes to talk about the struggles we go through with different things. But I just want to say that I think you're incredibly strong for handling it as well as you're handling it. And you've taught us so much, through sharing your experience. So thank you for doing this. And I really hope, people start podcasts for all kinds of reasons and stuff. I didn't think that this podcast was going to become such a place for us to kind of learn about people's personal life experiences like this. But I'm really thankful for the fact that, we've had you here and everybody who's given their time to help us just become more aware of the world we live in and the situations we deal with. So thank you so much. Thanks, Isaiah, for watching Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I thought he put his entire hand in his mouth. I wasn't playing when I said that.
And I also want to take a moment to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We've had quite a few people participate and stuff. We got a question that came in from Janelle Marshall, who was wondering if anybody's sending their kids back to school or daycare. Reluctantly, we are. And also, when we were talking about some of the treatments, Bernie Cole wrote, nobody wants their kids on chemotherapy. And I didn't even realize that chemotherapy was what it was treated with. So that's wild, man. But, hopefully there's going to be some breakthrough at some point that's going to help our community and those suffering with this. So.
And I hope that everyone who hears this and more people in the Black community in general just become activated and sort of, it's super important. Get tested. If we can figure out, I wish there were drives, like there was go, figure out your blood type drives. I mean, that would be amazing. That would be so just so that you can know, because at the end of the day, I mean, if you're aware of your blood type and if your partner's blood type, then you can make a more informed decision. Are we going to actually try to have a child? Is that something we want to risk? Is that something that we want to do? We want to have a child that will potentially go through everything that, children go through, or are we thinking about doing something else? So I think that it's important. And because I heard it's like the most common genetic disorder, or one of the most frequent genetic disorders in terms of like the probability, or in terms of like it's not
like it's both parents.
Yeah, it's like it's not as rare is what I'm trying to say. It's like it's yeah, exactly.
It is quite common in certain communities, and so when I was in research, I did go to several conferences because this was like an international study. And in the United States, so in Atlanta, they had the biggest center for sickle cell disease, and I tell you, the volume of patients that they have is unbelievable, like thousands, right? Our sickle cell clinic, I don't have a number, but it's like nowhere near that. But it is it's a lot of people, objectively.
Yeah. True. And also a reminder, it's really important, as we learned with Daphne last week, give blood. Give blood. When things kind of normalize, or I guess I shouldn't even wait for things to normalize, but I'm probably going to pay attention to blood drives in my area and at some point try to give, because, for our community, for the sake of our community, I didn't realize that specifying that you are a Black blood donor is important for patients of sickle cell anemia. So, just a reminder to those of you watching the podcast, if you're afraid to do it, if you don't like needles, trust me, it's a small pinch. They'll drain some blood and you get like a snack after. So, who doesn't like snacks, right? So, yeah.
And that's why you do it.
And just considering someone as small as that little one that was just here already had 2 blood transfusions, and he's 2. So
right, that's it.
There's little children out there who last weekend, his hospitalization, it was a good one, because he only got pricked about only got 5 or 6 IV attempts, and it's usually about 14.
And that's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and it's usually about 14 or 15 during the whole hospitalization. So he only got 5. So we're like, hey, I was happy. So
Yeah.
if you can't handle one, but he's got to handle 5, I mean, just do it for the kids. Do it for the kids.
Exactly. I'm going to tell you guys a real quick but funny blood donation story. So I went to give blood once, right? And the nurse, she takes your vitals, she takes all your signs and tells you, like, okay, you're good to go. And so she took my blood pressure, and my blood pressure was a touch high. So I go to her, I'm like, well, good, I'm giving blood, so that should lower my blood pressure.
Wow.
Yeah, she looked at me like I was so stupid. But it was worth it. It was worth a laugh. But yeah.
I mean, technically, you're right. Technically. I'm not saying morally or ethically, but technically.
See, I'm smarter than I look.
Right.
So anyways, I want to thank everybody for tuning into the podcast. Thank you again for being with us, Aviva, and thank you, Lori, for joining us.
Yeah.
We're going to let you guys go. But before I do so, I just want to say real quick. So for those of you who follow the podcast, Gift and I have been doing some talking and some thinking about just how we want to structure things moving forward. So we're going to be going to a bi-weekly podcast. So it's good this week for me is pay week. So that means next pay week, I'll be in a good mood to do the next podcast.
Oh.
So please look out for us every... Yeah, and it's really a matter. It's a matter of just wanting to organize ourselves better. We want to better structure, like when we do these interviews and how we select our topics. But I will say that we are probably going to be doing pop-up broadcasts. They won't be as long as a typical podcast, but we may just, if a topic comes up that week that we want to cover, that we want to talk about, we may do little episodes here and there. So moving forward, that's what's in store for the Unashamed Truth podcast.
Yes.
And on that note, I'm going to wish everybody a good night, and thank you again for joining us to watch this episode. And hopefully this has been as informative for you as it has been for us. So thank you guys, and have a good night, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.